Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and I'm pleased to welcome Mary Miller from ImageTag for today's session all about automating business processes. As we get started, please know that we do want to make this an interactive session. I know Mary has a couple of poll questions planned, and we'll definitely be making time to take your questions as well. You can enter your questions at any point using the Q&A block that you should see just to the right of the main presentation area. As I said, enter those at any point throughout the event, and Mary will be making time to take those. So without any further delay, we're going to get things started, and I'm going to hand things off to Mary. So Mary, welcome.
Thanks, Jason. It's exciting to be here today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and thanks for MS Dynamics World for hosting this event to help get everybody on the same page, virtually, of course, not physically. We don't like to print. That's kind of a four-letter word. But we want to get everybody on the same page as it relates to process automation, specifically within Dynamics GP and Dynamics SL. So let's dive right into the heart of the matter and talk a little bit about why that even matters. What's the problem that's making you consider doing anything, whether it's around managing the documents that you need to get into those systems, automating those documents through some sort of workflow, approval process, those sorts of things. Why do anything at all? Well, the why is quite clear. If you look at the slide in front of you, there's 4 different research data points that suggest very strongly why you should do something about it. The first is upper left-hand corner, 70%. 70% of businesses would fail within 3 weeks if they were affected by some sort of flood or natural disaster or fire or something like that. And having been through losses of both fire and flood in my life, let me tell you, it is no good experience, which I'm sure you can imagine. However, if it was in your business environment, you can also extend that imagination, unfortunately, to the potential loss that you would experience if you no longer had access to the documents, those stored in file cabinets and boxes and, basement storage and that sort of thing. So 70%, pretty big, pretty impressive number that would, of businesses that would be affected by some sort of loss. Upper right-hand corner, 30%. Now, this is one that is really kind of tough for people to digest sometimes because you probably don't have a line item in your budget for the amount of time that it takes for a person to hustle around the office, call the person on the other side of the town or state or country or world for that matter, chase off-site documents and storage and all that kind of stuff. But 30 to 40% of time, research shows, is spent by the typical employee, especially in the accounting and HR worlds, looking for information, looking for documents that's typically stored somewhere in email and filing cabinets. So again, that paper problem just kind of haunts us and leaves a trail, if you will. So another important point, lower left, 22%. This is the percentage by which paper is growing in the average in a typical office on an annual basis. So what that means is in a period of about 3 years, your paper is doubling. Faster, of course, if you're a larger organization. And then lower right-hand corner, a number that, again, you probably don't have a line item in your budget for this, but very significant, $125. And research suggests this by gathering all sorts of data points from companies of all shapes and sizes across multiple industries, and our customers validate it as well, that it's about the cost of replacing or finding that misfiled document. If you have to go back to the source for replacing a document, that cost jumps to typically to $350 to $400 per document. So that's a pretty significant why, a pretty compelling reason as to why you should do something about the paper problem. Now, a lot of people don't think necessarily of the paper problem as being directly related to their ERP system, but what we find and what our clients tell us is that it's very closely related because the operational management of all of those critical business documents, financial or otherwise, sometimes they're vendor documents, sometimes they're contracts, sometimes they're legal in nature, sometimes they're partnership related in nature, sometimes they're about employees. Many times they're financial statements and invoices that were approved in order to process and generate those financial reports. So they always seem to end in the finance and accounting space. And so those are the teams. If you represent them, you're very familiar with this process. You represent where those documents end and live, and you're accountable for them. So the first step in doing something about that paper problem is to capture those documents and make them digital in nature as early as possible in their life cycle. And I can just tell you that when I was putting myself through college years and years ago, I worked for an accounting firm, and I would be the one who would come in and manage a stack of, invoices that represented multiple clients. And, so I had to do, tons and tons of data entry and managing and tracking and tracing those files. And heaven forbid that one of those customers called us and said, hey, do you have that one vendor payment that we did last month or 3 months ago? And I mean, you can all imagine, you probably live it and deal with it still every day. It's not only the interruption of the flow that you're dealing with right now, but then the time that you have to spend chasing that document, and by the time you get back to what you were doing, potentially an hour later, you're starting over. So capturing that document digitally takes all of that out of the equation. Okay, so the next step that you can think about in this transformation of your business is to integrate those documents because they live in your world. Many times they're invoices. Many times they are related to invoices of a purchase order, a price quote, a change order, an addendum, an estimate, or something like that. Those are all the documents that support the financial transactions that you manage and store and update within your ERP system. So once you've got the document digital, integration into your ERP system is a pretty key element to be able to manage that and find it on an ongoing basis, and without leaving the system that you're already using to enter your transactions into. And certainly the final time-saving element, and what we find often gives the greatest extent of efficiency, is the automate step. So the minute a document, ideally digitally, enters your organization, if you can automate that for coding, for updates, for project or task details, for approval, before it gets entered into the ERP system, you're taking away that front end of the research, that 30 to 40% of time, because you're doing the entire process digital. The data gets entered digitally, it gets routed digitally, it gets in an email, or it winds up in somebody's electronic work queue. No more stacks of paper that they come into every day, and heaven forbid it's lost, and then now they're on vacation or something, and now there's a significant delay in getting your vendors paid and running your business. So capture, get rid of the paper, integrate into the systems that you use every day. What I'm going to show you is that direct integration within Dynamics GP and Dynamics SL. So those are the two systems that we'll focus on today. And then certainly automate those documents through the approval process so that before they even enter your ERP system, you've got a workflow, you've got an audit trail, you have a history of what happened with those. Now, I'm just going to spend a minute talking about what else you could do with that. What we find happens in many, many cases is that, clients start with that financial presence and impact of, I need to get these invoices off my table, they're taking too long, vendors are getting mad, people aren't getting paid on time, I have no visibility, and at the end of the day, I have to be able to produce a report for management or our board or our vendors even to show them payment status, and I have zero visibility. So that's where the pain starts, because it's often the greatest in those processes. Now, it's also very evident that across the hall or down the hall, potentially in your organization, potentially in a different office, HR is feeling those same types of burdens. They have multiple files for employees, contractors, partners that you may work with, people that you might outsource things to. So you look across the hall and you say, hey, there's this paper problem going on over there too. We can probably help them with this system that we put in place to manage our documents for finance. And yes, that is in fact the case. And so it's often kind of the first sister application, if you will, that people look to automate or look to manage with a document management platform. Certainly vendor contracts, legal documents can pile up, version control, being able to find them, again, at a moment's notice when something needs to be accessed for business decisions. You need to be able to find those with a click and not in hours or days or weeks. Sales orders and fulfillment, something that people don't often think about when they look at their typical AP or finance automation solution or document management solution. We have clients that as soon as they opened a second location, for example, their sales orders were now getting lost, and so they needed to be able to send them into a centralized source. So they automated their sales order review and approval process that consisted of more than like 16 different documents that was a complete sales order. All of those needed to be brought together. So my point is, don't just think of this as a solution for finance. It certainly starts there. It certainly addresses a very significant need that you're going to experience there, but it also can be used across any department, any process in your organization. And having the ability to integrate directly within the ERP system, which, as I mentioned, I'm going to demonstrate for you in a moment, is certainly key because, again, those documents come back to you. You need to be able to find them. You need to know where they're associated, where they live inside your ERP system. So before we get too far into the conversation and just before I do the demonstration of how these things come to life, I'd like to hand it over to Jason so that we can get kind of that first poll going there. Thank you, Jason. So the question we have here is, what holds your organization back from prioritizing process automation? You can select all that apply, but maybe there's just one or two that are significant in your organization. So the options are lack of upper management support, budget constraints, difficult to prove ROI, lack of time to research solutions, concern about internal adoption. Certainly that's, all of these are things that we hear on a regular basis. So it could be one or more of them that, that has led you to this, let's do something about it, and why should we do something about it at this point in time? So, Jason, are we getting some significant responses here? Oh, Jason's on mute. So go ahead. Oh, there we are. There's the results. Thank you very much. So yeah, thanks for sharing. And I'm not surprised to see budget constraints be number one in this answer. It's also not surprising to me to see lack of time to research because, let's face it, you're spending 30 to 40% of your time chasing documents around. So I certainly can understand and relate to those. And we're going to talk about how you can take the information that you're going to learn today, that we're going to discuss today, to hopefully feed into that. How do I share this information? How do I make it compelling for upper management and my peers to know that there is a solution that's A, easy to implement because it works with the systems that we already use, and B, affordable and has demonstratable ROI. So that's what we're going to talk about when we get into the demonstration. I'll share use cases that help support that for you as well. So let me just talk for a second about the integration with GP. QuickTag, at its core, again, document management. You can access documents and add documents and tag documents and find documents within GP on 75 different forms. Actually, this is 75 plus the number's a little bit north of 80 now. So 80 different forms within GP have this little additional menu when you have QuickTag in place that let you tag, view, search, email directly from GP, but leveraging the QuickTag connector. So we have a very light technical footprint in doing that. And the reason for that is that QuickTag manages a separate database. We're an entirely separate server. We're connected to GP, but we don't overtake the database. So we're not consuming any resources. We're not adding things to your database. We're not going to ever be in a situation where your database could become corrupt because QuickTag is there. We're not putting anything into the GP database. It lives entirely separately. And that's a really important distinction if you have, like many people, used the Doc Attach feature that is the native functionality within GP. And Microsoft will be the first to say that that feature was really designed to be a transactional solution. And here's why. Because once you attach a document using the GP feature, you have no way to search for that document because it's only attached to that particular transaction. So you have to know which transaction you attached and related that document to in order to go back and find it. So it's really designed to be I'm going to need this later. I need, some sort of proof point for this particular type of transaction. It's really not designed to be the full-scale document management, such as QuickTag. So I would encourage you to think about when you need to have access to documents of any sort, searchable inside GP or outside of GP for non-ERP users, make that easy to find and manage the documents across the entire business. So certainly you'll be able to see that when we take a deep dive into this demo here in a second. And I'm going to show you our view of that from an automation standpoint as well. So first there's the option to capture, again, to tag those documents, and then I'll show you the workflow that goes along with them, where the documents can actually be approved before being automatically created in GP. Similarly with SL, we attach to about 42 different forms, and this is what your digital work queue looks like in SL. Again, we're not taking away any SL functionality. We live entirely separate. Our direct connection is supported via MEF, so we have very fast performance. We're not lagging your SL activity whatsoever. And we've built the client interface to look and feel just like SL in this case, and of course just like GP in the slide that I showed you before. So we'll take a look at those things in just a moment together as well. So we made the learning curve really easy because I noticed that in your responses a moment ago, one of the things that people struggle with is adoption to new software. And when you make it really easy, when you make it look and feel like the system that you're using every day, you're really minimizing that learning curve and the adoption of new technology. So we're going to skip over this one, although if you have considered UseNav or potentially will use Nav in the future, just know that we're attached to about 80 different forms in Nav as well. So with that, I'm going to jump over into my demo environment here and show you what I'm talking about. It'll all become very clear for you when you see it in action. So I'm switching screens, and what you're looking at now is what we call our GP professional client. Now let me tell you the story here. Remember when I was in college and I was doing all those invoice data entry and I was, in essence, the AP person for those companies because they outsourced it to us. You are most likely the AP person in your organization, or you work with them, or they're on your team, or you manage them, or you send documents to them. So we're putting on our AP manager hat in this role where we receive a number of different invoices. Instead of sitting in a stack on our paper on our desk, a stack of paper on our desk every day, we're getting them here digitally. This is our digital work queue, our dashboard. This is telling us that we've got 20 documents that need to be tagged, 6 that need some sort of edit assignment, maybe the GL code was wrong or something like that, and 3 that are waiting for our approval. I better get on those are a little bit old. We'll come back to that later. So we'll dive right into the tag step, and you can see what I'm talking about. So all of these invoices have been sent straight into QuickTag. This is the capture step, right? We have to get them into the system. Now, in this case, they've been emailed directly in. You can tell that because over here on the left-hand side, it shows the drawer that they're in, which is just sort of the QuickTag nomenclature for where they live in our database behind the scenes. They've been emailed or uploaded. So there's a lot of different ways you can get invoices into the system, into QuickTag. You can email them in, you can upload them, you can scan them in, you can have people send them directly, which is really what we encourage. A lot of clients find it the easiest process in the world to just give their vendor, hey, could you just send that to invoices@mycompanyname.com, and we'll set up that email with you so that you're feeding the system directly and there's no middleman. There's no printing, there's no filing, there's no copying, there's no scanning, there's no faxing. It all comes straight in to QuickTag. So this is the experience if you use GP. I will show you in just a few minutes what this is like if you are using SL, but you can follow along because the process is going to be very similar. So I simply right-clicked and I'm given these 4 different workflow options. Now, these could be very different based on your organization. We're going to choose one that's invoice approver selection. That's a common scenario that we experience, and certainly one that might be real for your organization as well, where you receive an invoice in, you have an initial coding step to do, some initial tagging of information to do, and then you're going to send it to somebody else for approval. They're going to approve it. And I remember back in the days of managing invoices where what that meant in those days was I'd get out the red stamp and I would stamp the paper with the little GL box and initials box and date box, and if there was anything special that you needed to do, comments, all of that kind of stuff. This replaces that and then so much more. So I can only wish that there was something like this when I was in that world, in that life. A long time ago. So I won't date myself just yet. But if you look at this experience, all I did so far is select the company ID. Now, by selecting Fabricam, which everybody knows Fabricam Day just happened, so that's really exciting stuff. If you followed along on social media, that was all over the place. We can find easily advanced office systems. So when I selected Fabricam, I'm now looking for at a direct list, this is a direct connection to GP, of all of my vendors that I have in the system. So this invoice is from Advanced Office Systems, so that's the vendor that I'm going to select. Now, if you blinked and looked away, you missed the fact that that just filled in 7 additional fields for me. So not only are you able to easily see the information directly from GP in this QuickTag experience, you're also able to eliminate some of the data entry that you have to do today. So if it's on the vendor card in GP, it pulls automatically through for this invoice data entry experience for the header. So I'm just going to put SDY World and webinar here in our description. Now that description also passes straight through to the description field in GP. So again, this experience, this look and feel, this layout should look and feel very familiar to you if you're a GP user, because it's designed exactly after the payables transaction entry screen. So we're going to put web 062017, add a little date again to make that unique. The reason for that is that we do an invoice due check, so you don't want to have duplicate invoices in the system. Now, when I click the distributions button, you see it took like, a tenth of a second maybe to load. That's because it's also doing a real-time call to GP to look up the default GL entries for this particular vendor in GP. So if I add a vendor, change a vendor, update these account codes, or need to change them, if I do that in GP, it's instantly going to be available to me here. If for whatever reason the defaults are not what I want to process this invoice, of course I've got the lookup ability to go select the account, or if you know them off the top of your head, you can certainly type them in as well. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to say OK, and we're going to accept the defaults. Now, let me just spend a second talking about this. If I had intercompany transactions, if I was using tax schedule IDs of anything, of any other, currency or entity or area, I could apply all of those things here as well. So I'm going to show you sort of the simple happy path, as we call it, but you could use any of those functions just like you would in GP. So I'm going to select my approver here from this dropdown, and if you have a list of defined approvers, for different department managers that always get the same invoices, you can save that step as well. We can automate that. So if you have an approval matrix or business workflows, we can build those right in that, if the invoice comes from Advanced Office Systems, that always goes to Mary. If it comes from somebody else, it always goes to Tom. Fill in the blank. We can automate that behind the scenes. But if they're new or one-off, or you like to give your AP team the option to control it, you can certainly have, an approver dropdown so that they can select. And then you can come down to the workflow comments and enter something here if needed. OK to pay. Please approve, said Jason. So webinars rock. We're going to go ahead and put that there. We're building the workflow history, okay? So in that little button in the lower left, again, if you blinked, you missed it, I clicked on the history button there, and it shows that this is in Mary's work queue and that it's pending this tag assignment. Now, all I really did was select one dropdown, a vendor ID, put in a document number, and an amount. So the rest of this information was populated for me. My GL coding distributions were already done. It took me a little bit of time because I was explaining each step as I go, but you can see how quick and easy that experience would be for somebody on the AP team. So I click Submit. It disappears out of my work queue, and I'm on with my day, and I go on to my next invoice. So I'm going to close out of the GP Pro client for a second, and we're going to come over to GP, and I'm just going to bring up the payables transaction entry so that you can get a feel for what we're working toward here. We're going to see that experience again, just as we have the approval process. So we'll come back into the GP Pro client now as Mary CFO, because that's who we sent this invoice to for approval. Now, there are several different ways that I could approve this as the CFO. I got an invoice via email, an email notification here that is coming in, just right now. So if I'm on the go, if I tend to travel a lot, I get this email that says, OK to pay, please approve, said Jason. I can scroll down. I see all of the details. I can get to the GL codes here down at the bottom. I can open the PDF because, of course, it's attached to this email. So, if I'm that OCD person that wants to look at every little detail before I click approve, which most people in accounting are, I know, I was there. I know I am, so I can relate to that. So I could simply reply, type in approve, put in my comments, and move on if I needed to add comments. If I approve, all I needed is approve and move on. If I was going to reject it, I would need to say why and give it some comments. Or I could come here in my work queue in the Pro client, because if I'm going to be working with a lot of invoices anyway, and I'm in the office on a regular basis, then I'll just have the Pro client up over here, or maybe the web client, which I'll show you that in a moment as well, that you can easily just come in, review the things that you need to have approved, and look at any of the detail that you need to review, and say OK. So we'll say OK to pay, webinars rock. That's good to go. Now, I could delegate it if I wanted to. Let's say that this came into me, but it's not really my budget. I want somebody else to take care of that. I could delegate it to somebody else. I'm going to cancel that. If I needed to reject it, again, we require comments. for audit trail purposes. And again, we're building that workflow here. So now we click on the history button and we see 2 steps, the completed tag, and now it's pending approval with Mary, the CFO. So of course, we're going to go ahead and approve it. And that invoice is now out of my work queue in the QuickTag Pro client. And we'll come back over to GP and we'll see that we're not going to do that now. So we'll see that it is waiting for us here in the QuickTag work queue. Now, I opened the payables transaction entry screen in GP. I went to the additional menu. This is where QuickTag attaches, and I come down to view work queue. So a second ago, we were looking at the work queue in the GP Pro client where we were tagging the documents. And then we went to the CFO who got an email notification. He could have done it online. He came back, in fact, did it in the Pro client. So he or she in this case. And then when the minute that person hits approve, your workflow is complete and it's now sent, that invoice is now sent straight into GP and it's just waiting for batch creation. Now here's the one that we're working with. It says, Mary, okay to pay, please approve, said Jason. So here's the one that we've got, the test, the document number, all of that kind of stuff. If you right click, you can see the details of all of that transaction information, including the GL codes down here at the bottom. And if you, let's make that go away. If you close that, if you want to, again, sometimes we like to be a little OCD, just make sure it's the right invoice. Right click, you can view the document directly from there as well. So lots of visibility points into what's going on with this document. Now, like in any GP or Windows product, I can multi-select. I'm hitting the control key. I could select one or many. I'm just going to select the one that we're working with today. And I'm going to click Create. And this is going to create a batch for, we can actually put this into an existing batch or create a new one for this specific invoice so that we can get it paid. I'm going to put it in Mary's batch. We'll say OK. And it's going to disappear out of my QuickTag work queue here that's connected to GP. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to come over to my batches. And I went a little too far. Give me 1 second here. And we will select it from this list. And it's going to be this one. So here's our invoice. I just referenced the voucher number that was displayed in the QuickTag work queue. It's not magic, actually, but it feels like it sometimes. Usually when we get to this point, it's, there's this reality of, wow, I didn't have to print anything. I didn't have to touch anything. I didn't have to write anything. I didn't have to wait for 2 weeks for it to get back to me from whoever's desk it was sitting on for approval. There's this whole sense of this entire process can be automated and quickly visible for you in accounting, for your ERP users, or from QuickTag if there's non-ERP users that need to access this type of information in the documents and transactions that they're related to. Now, I can go back to this additional menu, and I can view the document that we just sent in. Of course, there's the invoice forever and always attached to this record in GP, but again, not in GP's database. It's in the QuickTag database. It's just available for us there to view. Now, let's say I need to add additional documents to this transaction. Let's say that I get an updated quote at some point in time and I need to add that. I can click on the little folder icon, drag and drop my price quote. Yes, I want to attach this document to that transaction. Close out of that. And now that document is also attached to this transaction. And what's really neat about that experience is that you can then send documents directly to somebody else. You can search, you can view, even from the work queue, you'll be able to send those to other people. Once you have those documents, you can, again, tag additional ones, view, search. Let's say somebody calls and says, hey, do you have that paid invoice, or do you have that document that we were working with on XYZ vendor or for whatever transaction? You can find the invoice here, email it directly from GP, and go back about your day. So again, saving that time of searching for information, sending it to people, looking in emails and file cabinets for 30 to 40% of your time. So we'll go ahead and save that transaction, and that'll be available to us at a later time. Now, when we have this similar experience for SL, I'm going to show you a feature that is available in SL only today, but it'll be available in GP as well very soon. That is going to change your world. You'll see what I mean in a second. We added the feature of, so everything that you just saw in the GP experience, the real-time connection, the look and feel just like GP payable transaction entry. In this case, it's going to be the voucher and adjustment entry screen in SL. But we added this feature called templates into the SL interface. Let me just maximize this so you can see what I'm talking about. When I right-click here, remember, when I right-click, these are my workflow options. This is what am I going to do with these invoices. I have them waiting for me to tag, but in SL, you have typically a lot of line items. Now, this one that I'm showing you doesn't, but you'll get the idea here in a second. You have a lot of line items. But regardless, we'll use this one. It's a better example. It's got 3 line items. In GP, you'll have similar situations. You get the same invoice every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter from the same vendor. So what this process enables is you can select, in this case, we'll show a project invoice, and we'll use a template, and we see that this is Pilar Ackerman. So we can just search for or filter to or go down the list, and yep, Pilar Ackerman, Cincinnati, that's the one I want. I'm selecting a template because this invoice is the same pretty much every time I get it. Now, if I need to update quantities of any type, I certainly can in this experience. And in SL, there's only 2 additional fields that I need to enter here. Again, this looks and feels very much like the voucher and adjustment entry screen. I'm just going to copy and paste that in, and I'm going to put webinar. Oh, I'm out of room there, so we'll put webinar. We'll pretend we can spell. Anyway, I'll grab this total down here, 4,500, put that in, and I'm going to put in an invoice date. We'll just select today's date. So what's happening is it took out all of the need for me to enter those line items. How cool is that, right? Because what's the biggest time suck when you're doing this data entry in SL in particular, or if you've got a lot of coding to do in GP, is the line item detail. Now, because I selected project invoice template, my project and task detailer left alone. Let's talk about that for a second. In a project scenario where we have clients using SL, many times the project manager or the department manager who's responsible for knowing the detail about why we're receiving this invoice is in the field. Let's say they're, on site at a construction site, like in this case, or if they're, at a client site doing a project, working on an implementation. Maybe they use, GP or SL, and you're doing your ERP system implementation. Regardless of the why, the project and task fields are going to be most likely entered by that person who's the project manager. So we can either select the project manager or just accept the default and have it routed to that person. But they can fill in then the project and task detail. But I didn't have to enter in any line items because everything here is automatically saved. So the only time you have to do this is once. So in our example, we're going to go ahead and click submit. Now remember, this is the AP person. I received this invoice. I don't know what project or task this is related to at all. So I'm just going to do the coding part that I can see. And then I'm going to send it to the project manager who's responsible then for taking that next step of approval. Well, I'm going to show you the Anywhere experience, which is a purpose-built web client for reviewing and approving QuickTag documents, in this case is invoices. So the one that we just sent through here is waiting for us, and here's the document. We can just click on it. This Anywhere experience is our web client, our brand new web client. It's responsive design, any device. Our typical scenario is that the project manager's in the field. Excuse me, I'm apparently talking too much. Our project managers in the field are doing this on an iPad. So they receive this notification. You maybe saw the email notification I just got in the lower right-hand corner. They could reply to an email with information. They could come here to Approval Central in their Anywhere client on their iPad or other device, or they could log back into the Pro client, which is what we did in the case of GP. But I'll show you what the experience is like in the Anywhere client. I simply click the little pencil there so that it's indicating that I want to edit it, and I come down to the line items. And the only thing I need to add here is the project and task detail. Of course, I'm in marketing, so I'm going to select sales and marketing as my project there, and we'll just put project management, keep it simple, click submit there, and I'm going to do this 3 times, 1 for each of these line items. And you can select the project at first, and then the task list, of course, is dependent on which projects you select. So when I worked over on the first line item, I selected sales and marketing. This time, because I selected business turnaround, I got a different set of task options. So each of those is going to be dependent on your SL settings for project and task. So at the line item level, you can assign things to either the same or a different project. In this case, we'll go back to sales and marketing, and of course our task list, we'll just select project management. and click Submit. So now I edited each of those 3 lines. I put in the project and task detail, and I'm going to submit the invoice back. So my job as a project manager who's now remote out in the field is done. So that action has been completed. Again, that invoice is out of my work queue and moved on to the next step. So the next step in that process is that it now needs to be approved. So it comes back to Mary CFO, and she is now going to approve it here in the Pro client. Again, I could approve it via email. I could go back into Approval Central as Mary CFO and approve it there, or I can come here in the Pro client. I'm just showing you the different experiences, the different options that you have to review and approve invoices through various workflows within both GP and SL. Now, when we come into the SL work queue and look at this invoice, we see that the project and task detail has been completed. This is still the same invoice that we were working with. Barry, that's our guy, he's the PM. There's our email notification in the lower right. We're going to add workflow comments of approved per Jason. So we're tracking that. And of course we could delegate or reject just like we could before. Workflow history, same thing. We're building the workflow as we go. We now see that there were 3 steps and it's pending approval with the CFO. I click approve and go on about my day. Now, I close out of the QuickTag Pro client for SL, and I come into the SL experience, and I go to the voucher and adjustment entry screen. And this is one that I had already done this morning, but it's exactly the same scenario. You would come to your work queue, you would view the documents that are waiting for you to have these transactions created. You can view them at the invoice level and at the detail line item level, and of course then they get, you can select here, this is the one we're working with. I can right click, I can view the document. So again, the experience is very similar. The transaction was created the same way, and now we're going to put it into a payment batch for SL, just like we would any other payment. And the documents, of course, are forever attached. You can tag and add additional ones at any point in time. So that's the experience for GP workflow and the experience for SL workflow from the point of the accounting person, the CFO for approval in the first example with GP, and the 2-step process where the project manager was remote and had to enter the project and task details for that particular invoice, and then it went back to the CFO for approval and then went straight into SL. So the automatic creation of those transactions and keeping the documents attached to those transactions within GP or SL is something that is fully automated. You never have to print. You never have to go back to any of those physical documents because everything is now going to be stored within your ERP system, but you also have the ability through the Anywhere client to search. Because one of the things that makes QuickTag different is that we scan 100% of the content in the document. So even if you're not using it for metadata fields, for populating those invoice fields within the header or line item detail, either for GP or SL, we're still searching 100% of that content. So if you know that you ordered 3 laptops, then you could search just on the word laptop, even if it wasn't in one of those metadata fields, and find it in QuickTag. So you're really accelerating that search, review, find, share, and then of course you could email that document to somebody who needed it, whether a vendor, employee, partner, or otherwise. Now, in the GP Pro client in particular, we didn't cover all of these details, but I just want to highlight a few of them for you because oftentimes you might be working with an out-of-the-box scenario or maybe a little bit unique situations where you use things like multiple account types, unit, freight, tax, etc. The GP Pro client supports all of those things. Certainly international taxes we talked about. One thing that I didn't show you but I want to make you aware of is that we also integrate with Key2Act job cost support. So in the GL distribution window, had you needed to integrate with Key2Act, then the job cost fields would have been available to you there, and we would have a direct integration to those job cost lists and codes that, of course, would be dependent on the jobs that you select in that drop-down as well, in that breakdown in the distribution window. Multiple currency and date formats, intercompany transactions, again, all of that can be automated directly from the initial coding point within the GP Pro client, and analytical accounting as well, all supported within the GP Pro client. So it truly is like GP. One of our clients actually called it GP on steroids because they were able to do so much more before the invoice even got routed for approval. So very, very powerful experience to be able to accelerate your invoice workflow, make your approvals very easy to process, and then, of course, have those documents captured and stored forever. Now, one of the things that common research shows is that the answers that you replied to the poll that we did earlier are very much in line with what's going on in the market. Lack of budget and current processes tend to be the top reasons that prevent people from moving toward automation. Now, what's interesting about that is that they probably don't take into account those numbers. We have an ROI tool actually on our website. There's one on Paystream Advisor's website. There's multiple out there, but so don't take our word for it. But you can plug in the number of invoices that you process, the number of people that are on your AP team, and a couple other data points, and it can show you in a matter of seconds the amount of money that you could be saving if you automate these things. So don't wait and let business case and research and budget be what's stopping you from moving forward in this situation, because you truly can not only put people back to being more efficient in their workday, but making them more productive and more happy and more excited about coming to work every day. And, let's face it, we all approach our day a little bit more positively when we don't feel like we're going to be drugged down by dreaded tasks of, manually running around chasing people. It's probably not what any of us signed up for when we took the job. So, like we've discussed in terms of the numbers, the research also suggests that those pain points are really what makes it a troublesome experience for people to deal with manual process. We call it sneaker routing, the running it down the hall of an invoice and waiting for somebody to approve. The manual data entry, the fact that it's prone to errors all throughout that process. When you think about what we just looked at together, whether in GP or SL, the fact that you have to do 2 clicks and 2 data entry fields, you're totally taking away many of the fields that even would normally be manually entered. So you're reducing that risk very significantly of any errors occurring in that step. Similarly, like we talked about, there's multiple different areas of your business that you can apply this. So if you look at expense management, let's say you get going with AP automation, you go, gosh, this is great. Now I've got all these people out in the field. They're submitting receipts. They do, manually. Again, we can probably all relate. We print out our receipts. We create an Excel spreadsheet. We hope we don't have any typos in it. We staple them together. We mail it to headquarters. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. You probably are too. But this is our life. This is what we've done for a long time. Certainly, there are tools out here that in the market that have made that more efficient. But if you could be using the same system that you use for AP and HR and expense management, again, you're just building that ROI, because 69% of expense reports are still mailed to AP. And that makes the average cost of each expense report about $26.60. So a little automation truly does go a long way in that situation. So, and here's some additional data points with some industry research that supports what else is going on with how those expense reports and how those receipts get submitted. Maybe you can relate. People are still scanning in, filling out spreadsheets. Paper receipts are still being mailed to the AP department. And again, most of this winds up in your lap. It comes to you for you to deal with. And so the resulting challenges, not surprising, are very similar to that of the AP process. The biggest expense management challenges are the same things that you face with the inefficient processes: data entry, lack of visibility into spend, frustrated employees calling you on the phone and saying, hey, when am I going to get paid? Frustrated vendors calling you on the phone, hey, when am I going to get paid? All of those things go off the table when you add an element of automation to this. So at this point, I get to take a break for half a second, and you get to participate in another poll. And I would just like to remind you that if you have questions, we will have time at the end for questions, so please go ahead and submit them into the Q&A box in your WebEx interface. But at the moment, direct your attention to the screen, and if you don't mind, take a quick second and answer the question, which area and department in your organization gets the highest priority for technology updates? So when you think about, like, yeah, we're going to make this big investment in IT, or so-and-so needs a new system, so-and-so needs new software, which area of the business typically gets prioritized as the ones that get those funds, that get those resources, that, always has the ear of the CFO? Well, if we could just do this, if we could just get this product, that would really help us. So which area do you see typically getting those funds and getting the ear and the priority of the investment?
All right, so why don't we do a 5-second warning here, and then we're going to close this poll.
All right, thanks, Jason.
All right, here are the results.
Nice, okay. Sales and marketing, product development. Yeah, that's been my experience too. Actually, product development is usually a little bit ahead in what I've seen over the course of my career, but as expected, operations and fulfillment and finance are significantly lower. Infrastructure is one of those that I guess if you're on the IT team, you would think that you're getting a lot of investment, but sometimes we deal with old school things there too, and manual processes there, and if we built it, then we deal with it. So not surprising, sales and marketing and product development are prioritized over operations, fulfillment, and legal, which is why building that business case is even more important, because you know you're kind of already at the bottom of the list, which is a tough situation to be in, but the reality is, oops, let me go back 1 second here. The reality is that you're the ones that have to manage the finances and produce the reports that support the business decisions that your organization is making. So again, a little automation goes a long way in this situation. So I'm just going to share a couple of use cases with you that we've experienced with our clients. Now, the first one was a very traditional AP automation scenario. This organization, CCA Global Partners, had multiple locations, and they had invoices that were being physically mailed to all of their different locations, and hopefully they were getting sent to the central accounting team. Well, what was really happening was the central accounting team was getting the calls from vendors saying, hey, where's my payment? And they said, I don't even know what invoice you're talking about. If you can relate to that scenario, chances are you feel these ladies' pain because they were in exactly that situation. And if you can relate to that, it might be time to consider what you can do about it. And so when we put in the Quick Payable solution, which is very similar to what we just looked at together with the GP Pro client and the integration into GP, is now they receive the invoices in, they scan or email them in directly to QuickTag. They have asked their clients and vendors rather to send them as much as possible directly into QuickTag. So when that's an option, they do that. There are still a few that they receive in the mail. They put a QuickTag barcode, just like the one we looked at digitally, and they scan them into QuickTag. And once they're received, they get tagged and coded, much like we look at together. Corporate staff, administrative staff reviews and approves it. They respond to an email, they say approved, or they go into a QuickTag client and approve it. And then now all of their invoices are centralized in QuickTag, but accessible to ERP users and non-ERP users. This really gives them visibility into their liability. So whatever they have outstanding in invoices, they now can get access to in the click of a button with a simple search and report. So they're no longer spending that 30 to 40% of time looking for documents in file cabinets and emails. So that's kind of the traditional AP automation scenario. I just give you one, I could give you hundreds, but that just happens to be the one that I chose. Now, this one is a very different scenario. Diligent Delivery Systems is a transportation and logistics company, and they have truckers driving all over the United States delivering products from point A to point B on behalf of their clients. Now, to do that, they have 3,000 independent contractors that come on board in, a pretty high turnover rate, so, 65 to 75 per month, that they have to manage about 30 different documents per driver per independent contractor. So think about it. You got your driver's license, your insurance, your training, your trucker certificate, anything that's required for CDL licenses or delivery, or maybe you need to have a certain certification for the type of product you're delivering. You name it. There's 30 plus documents for each one of these contractors that needs to be sent in. And the general managers felt like they were, ambulance chasers almost, where they're meeting up with truckers and drivers at truck stops and at rest areas and trying to get these forms, trying to get these documents. Because the drivers, in order for them to drive, they had to have these documents submitted for legal and audit compliance and other business reasons. So what we did is we put a solution in place that gave the drivers the ability to snap a picture with their phone, just like you would do for receipts, like we talked about a moment ago, and send them in directly from their phone. We attach them to an email address that we had designated for each one of these independent contractors. They send it into QuickTag. Some of them get routed for approval because they require every 6 months or every year to be updated. So those need to be, reviewed and approved by people within the Diligent Delivery organization. So those get routed for approval, and then they get sent into QuickTag. And then all of these are built around a case. So for every independent contractor, there is a case that has all of these different documents. So they're easily found, easily searchable, all visible to the people that need them. They started out needing AP automation But as we got into the use case and realized this was actually a greater pain, a greater organizational challenge for them, they put this solution in place before AP automation. So sometimes it really just depends on where the greatest need is in your organization. So we eliminated the paper trail, and we were able to give them complete visibility into all of their independent contractors' documents that were being updated and submitted from these 3,000 different people. And it eliminated a lot of the risk. They used to have information stored in 26 four-drawer file cabinets. They're happy to say now they're down to 0, and they no longer need to store any paper documents for this process. So overall, whether it's in accounting or expense management or independent contractor onboarding, sales order processing, the benefits of automation quickly become visible. You're saving people's time. You're getting back that 30 to 40% of your day. You're increasing your efficiency and your productivity. People are excited about coming to work because they feel like they're adding additional value to the organization. And certainly from a functional standpoint, you can put your finger literally on any document with a click of a button just by searching in QuickTag. And finance and managers and audit trails are now as easy as looking at a report in QuickTag. You can see the visibility. Remember that workflow history, the audit trail. In fact, a different client of ours shared with us that they went through a HIPAA audit not that long ago and passed with flying colors simply by giving the auditor temporary access to QuickTag. They were able to find all the documentation, see all of the workflow history, drill down into viewing the documents. They could find things on the accounting side as well, when things were paid, what check batch included, which invoices. I mean, they went from having weeks of auditors in their building to getting it down to just a few days. So they quickly able to meet audit and compliance requirements. So now you understand a little bit about why you would do anything. You can use these data points to help build your own business case, start testing the ROI waters, so to speak, and putting together that documentation for your peers and your board and your management team to understand why automation can truly benefit your business. Why would you do it with ImageTag? Well, we've been doing this for about 20 years, and we've got about 9 different patents that support some of what we do. What I described was the content search, the specific, we search all of the content, not just the metadata. That's a very unique thing to the QuickTag product. And, you know, what's interesting to me is that I worked for this company for almost 2 years now. When I started here, we had 7 patents. So we continue to build new things into the product. We continue to innovate, and that's all based on input and feedback that we receive from our clients and partners, you in the market. And we have the deepest integration across the 4 ERP systems within Dynamics Suite, so you can customize anything that you need from a demo standpoint. Let us know what your business case is, and we'll put together how you can capture, integrate, and automate any processes within GP, SL, AX, or NAV. And we have about 120,000 business users doing that around the globe. And I'll share with you just a few of them with what I call the ImageTag family snapshot. So one of the things I'd like to point out about this slide is certainly, you know, you can't fit all the logos of all of your customers on one slide, but that's not the point. The point is that we have companies of all shapes and sizes and industries, from professional sports teams to retail organizations to service and energy to, you know, the smaller mid-sized educational institution, nonprofit, professional services. There's no right or wrong industry, shape, or size of an organization. What they all have in common, and you probably do too, is they all manage paper. They all have those problems that we talked about at the beginning. They all struggle to have visibility into their processes and the documents that they use to base their business decisions on. So remember, put in your questions in the interface for the Q&A section of the WebEx portal that you're looking at. I'm sharing just a couple of resources for you here, because if you are building your business case and you need some additional research to support it, I would encourage you to check out these links. The ROI white paper that was produced by Paystream Analysts. They're an industry research organization. QuickTag, our process automation solution. Certainly you can visit them on our website, and our general website link. I'll give you just a second. I know Jason's recording this, so you don't have to write anything down. Don't worry. No paper. But at this time, we would also like to encourage and welcome your questions and discussion. So we've got just a few minutes for that. Jason, I'll send it back to you for Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And yeah, we have some questions that have already come in. And Mary, this is also probably a good time to put up that last and final poll question just to gauge audience
Oh, yeah,
sentiment.
good point.
So I'll launch that as well. Just one more optional poll here. But let me get into the questions. One's asking, are there limitations to what your solution can do for Canadian customers?
Yeah, no, there are not that we're aware of. I'll give you a couple examples. We have several clients in Canada that use the product and have, the multiple currency fields. They use different tax schedule IDs, and they're able to use the Pro client that I demonstrated for you today, just the way that any company in the U.S. In fact, several of our early adopters of that product are in Canada and also the UK. We intentionally went to U.S. and non-U.S. companies as we were testing that product and getting early adopter feedback and beta feedback and all of that. So many of the people that were using it even out of the gate gave us implementation examples, and they are having the same experience as the company in the U.S. And in fact, they actually test it to a little bit greater extent because they test some of the features that aren't as relevant for the U.S. audience, like the multi-currency and international tax schedules and such. So no limitations that I'm aware of. Good question. Thanks.
Are the QuickTag user licenses tied to Dynamics GP?
No, they are not. They are completely independent, whether that's GP or SL or NAV or AX. The QuickTag licenses are based on your user type. So if there are 5 people on your accounting team and they're the ones that need to do the coding and tagging, then they're the ones that would get 5 QuickTag licenses. If there's people that only need access to it in the ERP, then they would get a different type of license, but it's not a one-to-one relationship at all. Yep, thanks. Good question.
What can we expect in terms of training and support?
So that's an interesting question because it can really sort of depend. As you saw when you went through the demonstration with especially GP and SL, the data entry experience is very similar to GP and SL. So some clients have told us that because we know this product, we kind of already know the QuickTag experience. So there is certainly training that begins from day one, whether that's we do a demo together and we customize and walk through your process and what that would look like in the workflow experience, to the minute that you come on board with QuickTag, you'll be assigned a dedicated project manager. They'll put together a customized implementation plan for you, and part of that implementation is a series of training. So there's QuickTag administrator training, there's QuickTag user training, and then there are a series of tips and videos that you can share with others in your organization so that as new users come on board, they can easily get up to speed. Or we're happy to do additional training sessions via WebEx like this on an ongoing basis as your team needs. So yeah, thanks. Good question.
Okay, I want to make a final call for questions here. I think we have one more at this point. And it's just asking how long it takes to get a QuickTag installation up and running.
Sure. So there's 2 answers to that actually, and the first is if you're looking for capture, the part that we looked at within GP, within SL, that tag feature, or if you just need to get documents into the system, like the diligent delivery scenario where they needed to just have the document management system in place first. The capture solution gets up and running in right around 3 to 4 business days, so less than a week, whether it needs GP SL integration or not, to be able to tag from within those ERP systems. It's a very quick install. If you need a workflow solution like the Pro client experiences that we looked at, whether GP or SL or otherwise, the workflow experience takes somewhere between 45 and 60 days. We say typically allow about 2 months. Again, depending on your workflow, depending on your business rules, depending on your requirements, it just requires a little bit more scoping. Even that we've done in less than 20 business days, but typically that's the exception. And typically that's because, it's tough for us to find time on your calendar and our calendar at the same time for everybody. You've got day jobs to support as well. So allow a couple of months, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit less, just depending on your requirements and the time and resources that you have to commit to the project at the time that you make that commitment as well. So it really sort of, I hate that answer, that it depends. But short answer for capture, less than a week. Workflow, I expect a couple months. So yeah, thanks. Good question.
Okay, and we do have one more question here asking, are documents available downstream to a third-party tool, as in feeding a trial balance plus supporting documents to a corporate performance management application like Budget Maestro?
So yeah, it's really easy to get additional documents into or out of. I'm thinking what you're asking is exporting. So it's very easy for us to be able to export or add a link to a different tool that would point back to the documents. It depends on how you would want those to be, routed and managed. If you just need to export them so that you can do analytics and tracking and other sorts of, reporting within a different tool, we can make that information available to you. If you need to just be able to link back to the document, then again, that's usually as simple as adding a secure link to where the document lives in QuickTag. So yes, both getting into and out of for use with other systems is certainly something that we would have a conversation about, but quite easily done, and many of our clients do it on a regular basis. So yeah, thanks. Good question.
All right, well, that is the last question in our list right now, so I think we'll begin wrapping up. There's a quick survey that'll pop up after you leave today. Any feedback you can give us is greatly appreciated. Our presenters appreciate it. We also like to hear what your experience was like attending today. So with that, I think, Mary, we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today and answering so many questions.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thank you, Jason.
All right. And we will be sharing follow-up information on the recording and the rest of the details. So with that, we're going to conclude today's event. Have a great day, everybody.